I've been playing on the stage since I was 16 or so. I was playing in just various gigs I could, mostly as a violinist. I played country music, I played Irish music, Scottish music. Even when I went to college, I was busking on the street to pay my rent. And it was only when I got out of school that I started playing in bands. And I had an interest in classical composition and had written new music, but it seemed like playing in bands was where the money was coming from. So as of 2003, I was playing in a band called the Hidden Cameras, which was pretty much the first sort of like more art pop band, that was playing festivals. It was still very new to me. I didn't know a lot of pop music. The only music I really listened to was classical music and rap. And so to kind of get in and be playing indie rock music was kind of new to me. So then it was around then that I started writing songs and pursued my own sort of musical career. I had written songs, kind of like sophomoric teenage sort of stuff, with the guitar when I was a teenager, but, it was mostly, I didn't know what I was doing. It was really in 2002, 2003 when I started hearing shushu that I kind of really understood a new approach to songwriting, which was much more about kind of telling jokes and about getting punchlines across and creating funny situations rather than communicating poetry. And I can feel like, I don't think it's just shushu, I think that you can hear it in Morrissey, you can hear it in Casper Combs, you can hear it in Destroyer. A lot of this kind of like stream of like songwriting that really influenced me, and suddenly I feel like it unlocked something and I was able to start writing songs. So my first band was called Les Mouches, and I was playing guitar and mostly screaming and crying, and it was only in 2004 when I started playing the violin and singing songs and taking more of a sort of an art pop approach. I started when I was very young, and I was in this sort of this stream of classical performance, learning classical pieces and playing in competition and stuff like that. But technically I had some problems, like I have a sideways vibrato and my bow arm is no good. And so there came a point when I was in the symphony, and then I was just like, I don't want to do this anyway. All my friends who at the time were very, very good, very, very talented, they've gone on to sort of illustrious careers, but I'm just making the best that I can do with my bad vibrato and bad bow arm. Well, it changed very quickly. When I first moved to Toronto and I was 21, 22, there wasn't much of a local music scene going on. There were some small bands, but there was not a lot of exporting. There was not a lot of ambition going on. It was really only when Hidden Cameras came together that they got signed to Rough Trade, and at the time they were the first Canadian band to be signed to Rough Trade, and it was a big deal. At the time there hadn't even been any Canadian bands signed to Sub Pop except for Eric's Trip. So for Hidden Cameras to get signed to Rough Trade was kind of a big deal, and made people think, oh right, we are a country in the world, and we can actually like kind of form bands and go on tour and travel outside of the country. And it really shaped and changed the way that like Canadian music was made. And then shortly after that, Broken Social Scene broke, and then Arcade Fire broke, and now it's become a considerable industry, and there's a lot of music going on, both on the very small scale level with just carpenters and people who run grocery stores who go and play in their bands on weekends and have their fandom. And I mean, those are some of my favorite bands, are those bands, and then you have the larger sort of more industrialized like mechanisms of bands like Metric that actually will go out and tour and play big stadiums and stuff like that. I did for a while. I was working in radio. I worked as a music producer, and I still think that my musical career is so diverse that I don't really think of myself primarily as a pop songwriter. Like, I think of this as just being kind of one job that I have. The four things that I primarily do are arrangement work for other bands or production and stuff like that, which is actually what I think I'm still most known for. Film scoring and new music composition, and then the pop songwriting as well. I kind of have to say I occupy a pretty specific place. Like, I mean, there are other bands that I am friends with and we work together, but my fan base, I think, is pretty specific. It's like the music that I make is so much more performance oriented because it is like the live looping, and you know, I have a rock band on stage, but it's kind of rooted in a sort of a performative, musical performative element. It's kind of a little bit further away from a lot of the standard now, which is to bands with backing tracks or straight up rock bands, you know, either kind of like, but it just kind of different aspirations, you know. I mean, in 2004 when I first started doing this, the idea of like being on stage and having a backing track, you know, was very unfamiliar, and people weren't liking it. People would give Peaches a hard time, you know, because she would go on stage with it. But as time has changed now, you know, 90% of bands play with a backing track or have Ableton running on stage. So the appeal of what I'm doing has changed, you know what I'm saying? Like at the time I think it was something kind of new and exciting, and now it's like it has a different feel. But, you know, times change. I played as a soloist for many years, but then in 2011 I got the band together and we started playing as a trio. I still do, all the songs are live looped. Like you'll hear them just building themselves up as the song goes on, but now I have a psych rock backing. We'll be playing mostly new songs off of the last two records, but I'll play some older songs as well on my own. Yeah, the Heartland and In Conflict. But from the first two records, I'll play a few songs from them as well, just because some of them are good. But I try to just only play the good songs. Oftentimes, like, my songs kind of write themselves like two halves at the same time. There's the part of me that's writing the musical aspect, and then the part of me that's writing the lyrics, you know, and the two of them work separately and kind of come together at the end. The song Tryst with Mephistopheles, for example, comes towards the end of the Heartland record, and it describes the scenario where the protagonist of the album, Lewis, he climbs a mountain to kill me, to kill the songwriter, and it's sung from his perspective. And that song, the lyrics mean a lot to me and kind of move me, you know, when I sing them every night. But then there are other songs which are strictly like technically like complicated, and I just am thinking about getting all the notes right. So me and my band we're good. We've been playing a long time, and these songs are very much internalized now. And when we get up on stage, we typically always play really well, and I feel really confident about the show. So what makes me happy is when the promoters do a good job and there's a good crowd. But it's very rare for me to feel disappointed after a show. I always feel very good afterwards. It doesn't matter if there's like 30 people or 300 people, I'll always feel good afterwards. The very first record that I made as Final Fantasy Has a Good Home, I did not know how to produce. I didn't know how to use, I didn't even own a computer at the time, so I didn't know all the songs I was writing on paper, and just like theoretically thinking about how they were going to come together. And so I went into a studio with a friend, and we were just tracking the violin. We didn't know how to mic the violin, we didn't know how to record my voice, and we only had a week to do it. So it was kind of like a crash course in how to make a record. As a result, I don't think the record's very good. Like, I mean, it was just kind of us quickly trying to bang through stuff. But the second record that I made, He Poos Clouds, I had a more clear idea about how I wanted to make it. And it was with a string quartet, and I recorded the string quartet and added stuff over top of it. And as a result, it feels and sounds more like a classical record than a pop record, but it was something that I was very proud of. With Heartland, I wanted to try and make a record that, you know, you could hear at a bar and it would sound normal and sound good. You know, something that would sound like other records, you know what I'm saying? Just from a production standpoint. And I also wanted to make a concept record, so that was kind of a large undertaking. It took me about 2 years to make it, just because I was trying to figure out how to record drums and how to record synthesizers. I don't have a background in recording stuff at home, you know, so I've been kind of learning it as I go. And now Within Conflict was, you know, sort of an extension of that record. The songwriting changed because I was writing from a more sort of autobiographical perspective. And also working with a rhythm section was a challenge as well. I'm just generally kind of slow at learning this sort of stuff, you know what I mean? I've never had a producer, so I've always kind of like been just kind of stumbling along, trying to figure out how to do stuff the way I want it to. But I also have very specific tastes for how I want stuff to sound, so sometimes it can take a while for me to get it right. In Montreal is interesting because there's not, the local music scene is more export oriented. There's not a lot of shows that go on, local shows that go on that are, you know, really exciting. Most bands, when they go and play a hometown show, it's just like they played them to their friends, you know what I mean? There's a much more exciting musical scene in Toronto, I've always felt. There's a lot of musicians like Eric Chenot, who lived there for a long time, and Ryan Driver and Alex Lukashevsky, who just play at the Transact Club and play there, you know, once a week. There's a lot more sort of like local stuff going on. In Montreal, since I've been there, there's really good parties and really good barbecues, but most of the musicians, they leave, they go out on tour. You don't have Arcade Fire suddenly sporadically showing up to play shows or whatever. Well, I have my band, Matt and Rob, and I'm always bouncing ideas off of them. Sometimes I'm working with them in studio and sometimes on my own, but I'm always running things by them. I have a few different engineers that I rely upon and a mixing engineer that I really like. So yeah, I have a kind of like some people that I choose to kind of work stuff out. Well, I've had a very busy few years because making the record was very intense, and then it came out while I was out on tour with Arcade Fire, and I haven't actually had any time off. My head's always been in my work, so in May I'm going to take the entire month off and do nothing but lay on a beach, which I'm really excited about. But other than that, I'm gearing up to make a new record. I have an idea for a record that I want to make very quickly. One that's going to be acoustic and not feature any synthetic instruments, no synthesizers or electronics or stuff like that. And that's something I'm really excited about. I've already been writing it on my computer. Typically the way that I'm writing songs is that whenever I just am going to the piano to work on something else or just playing something else, that I always have my phone with me to just record any ideas that come to my mind. And then like months later, you know, I'll go through and listen to everything that I've recorded and pull the things that I like, that I think sound good. So, you know, I'm still discovering like little things, ideas that I've recorded from 2 or 3 years ago that I'm just now putting into practice and trying to turn into songs.
You collect things?
Yeah, collecting melodies and collecting chord changes and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I just have 50 recordings, like little snippets from the last couple of years, you know, anytime I've just been at a piano just to record a little idea, so it's just a matter of turning them into songs. Yeah, well, I mean, I know the oldest songs that I ever wrote. I just was thinking about the looping process because I had friends who were doing it with guitars, and I remember when I was quite young, when I was 23 or 24, it just suddenly occurred to me that I could do that looping process, and I wrote 4 songs while sitting on a street corner just like one day when I was in Texas, you know, on tour with another band. So I just had them all written out, and then when I went home, I, you know, borrowed a looping pedal from a friend and spent a week trying to get the songs together, and then I put on a little concert and only played 4 songs, but the reaction from my boyfriend and from my friends was so positive that I decided to keep going with it. Yeah.